Alright, chapter 3.7b is the last section for what we're going to do in this class. Yesterday what we learned how to do was translate and solve the absolute value equations. I think some of you kind of forgot all the chunks of what was going on, but let's just take a look at what we did. What we had to do yesterday was when we saw an absolute value all by itself, first off we had to isolate it. But when the absolute value was all by itself, what we learned to do is rewrite it without the bars. So 6x plus 3 equals 15. And then we would put 6x plus 3 equals negative 15. Again, the word there was and. And then so those were my two equations. I would then have to solve it. And so I would do minus 3, 6x equals 12. Divide by 6. And x was equal to 2. On the other one, again, you would subtract 3. 6x would equal negative 18, divide by 6, and x equals negative 3. Checking that out, 2 times 6 is 12, 12 plus 3 is 15, the absolute value of 15 is 15. 6 times negative 3 is negative 18, negative 18 plus 3 is negative 15, and negative 15 equals, or absolute value of negative 15 equals negative 15. But again, what we learned to do in the main part yesterday was the translation part, which gave us our two parts. You will never ever solve an equation with absolute value bars. You must split it into two different equations to make sure that you get both of those answers. The only time you won't have more than one answer is whenever it's equal to 0, because the absolute value of 0 is just 0. It's not positive 0 and negative 0, it's just 0. Today what we're going to do is look at absolute value inequalities. The essential question for this is what makes absolute value inequalities more quote-unquote difficult than the absolute value equations. And again, I only put it in quotes because it's not really more difficult, it's just crazier a little bit. Like I said, I don't want you to think it's difficult, because once you do that, it kind of changes the way you approach it. Well, the honest question is that two things become an issue. The first thing we have to learn today is that the symbol indicates and versus or in this part, and the symbol must switch on the rewrite. So what I'm talking about is, when we switch this 15 to be negative, we have to also turn this around, because if you remember with inequalities, whenever we switch one, we switch all. Excuse me. So you'll still write it the same way on the first part, but when you do the second one, you'll have to take these two symbols and switch it around. Alright? So the first rule of translating absolute value inequality is that the symbol indicates whether we use the compound word of and versus or. These two symbols, less than or less than and equal to, require the use of the word and then greater than or greater than and equal to require the use of the word or. Keep those notes until you learn it. It looks difficult, but there's actually a way to help you remember. Keep in mind, I'd usually try to use stupid things to help you kind of visualize what's going on. And first off, what you should do if you get stuck is just write both words in alphabetical order. Of course, A is before O, so and would be on the left, or would be on the right. Now if you imagine drawing the symbol, notice this symbol points towards and, which is what it says it has up here. This symbol also points towards and. This symbol points towards or. This symbol also points towards or. And again, notice that the symbol actually points at the proper word. So you can either write and or you can just imagine that this points towards and, that would go towards the second word, which is or, and as long as you understand it, that's fine. Again, I will admit it might be a stretch, but you can always try your own way of recalling that, but that's just something I used when I was learning it. But either way, you're going to have to know it for the test, so make sure you start trying to find your own way to get that part right. The second rule of translating absolute value inequality is that we must switch the inequality when we switch the outside value. That's what I was telling you about earlier. When you do your second equation and you switch the outside number, you must also switch the inequality. So once again, there's not going to be a lot of focus on solving and graphing, but that's because we should have already practiced that skill. I just want to get you to the point where you have your equations and you get to solve them on your own, but I want to make sure I at least get you to the point where you need to be. So looking at some examples before we get ready to wrap this up. First example, again, just translating the inequality. First thing I want to do is recognize that I would write it without the bar. So 3x plus 1 greater than or equal to 12. Again, looking at that symbol, it is pointing this way, which of course is or, and so you use the word or, and then you rewrite the bar again the left side, so 3x plus 1. You switch the sign around and you switch the number on the other part, and that is your translation. So again, 3x plus 1 greater than or equal to 12. That symbol points to OR, so that's the word we use. And then 3x plus 1, switch the symbol and switch the number. So these two parts should be opposite of each other in both of these. Notice that number, or that sign, is opposite of that sign. This number is opposite of that number. And as long as you've got it, the other thing you've got to do is make sure you have the right word. Alright. 9 minus x less than 14. Again, first thing you'll do is write it without the bars. 9 minus x is less than 14. This symbol points towards what we would see as and then you rewrite your 9 minus x, you switch the sign, you switch your 14. That is all. Alright. So 9 minus x is less than 14, and 9 minus x is greater than negative 14. Again, notice this symbol is opposite of that. This number is opposite of that. The 9 minus x should be the same because you never change what's on the inside of that absolute value part. On this one, the first thing you have to do is make sure you isolate it. I cannot do anything with this 2 there, and so the first thing I must do is get rid of the 2. So I end up with the absolute value of 6x plus 3 less than or equal to 5. From there, once I have those two things going on, what I do now is go ahead and translate it. I get 6x plus 3 less than or equal to 5. That symbol is pointing towards and. What's going on, man? I rewrite this part here. I get 6x plus 3 again, and that would be switching the sign here and switching the 5 over, and that is where we're going to go. Again, the 6x plus 3 stays the same. The symbol points towards the and, as we know, and then you go ahead and just switch the sign, switch the number. Notice again, those two are opposite. These two numbers are opposite, and that's where we are. A couple more examples. 5x minus 1 minus 6 in absolute value greater than 14. Again, the first thing you have to do is isolate the absolute value, so we've got to move this 6. It is a negative 6, so we will add it to both sides, bringing down the absolute value of 5x plus 1. 6's go away, bring down the symbol, bring down the 20. Once we have the absolute value by itself, that's where we translate it. Write it without the bars first. The symbol points this way, which of course would be OR. Rewrite the 5x plus 1 again, switch the symbol, switch to 20. And again, from there, whenever you do your work today, you would go ahead and solve those all the way out and graph them, and you'd be good to go. And then one more example, of course, that represents the hardest you would see, which has a number here and a number there. So first thing we would do is move the 7, if you remember that from yesterday. Bring down 2 times the absolute value of x plus 4 less than or equal to 12. Again, once we're there, the absolute value is still not isolated, so we will divide by 2, bring down your absolute value of x plus 4 less than or equal to 6. And again, once that absolute value is isolated, we go ahead and bring it out. So x plus 4 less than or equal to 6. Notice the symbol points that way, which would be and. Rewrite your x plus 4, switch the symbol, switch to 6, and you're good to go. So final thought on this is to remember that each lesson is mainly focused on 2 keys. I've tried my best not to overwhelm you with anything. As long as you take time to review those keys in each lesson, you should be able to perform well on the assessment. Again, going back to section 3.1, 3.2, 3.1, 3.4, 3.6, and 3.8, 3.7, which is what we're doing right here. As long as you can focus on the 2 key parts, study those parts. Your test is next week. You have a whole week to study for it. If it's important to you, you need to make sure you act like that and get as much studying and questions as you can answered. Other than that, you have a assignment to do today that is you can work together, but this assignment that's on there is listed as a in-class quiz, in-class lab. Go to that now. You can work together. Just make sure you finish, because whatever grades you get on it is your quiz grade for the week. So good luck.